Okay, this is 8th grade lesson 6.2. Today, students will use the Pythagorean Theorem to find the missing lengths of a right triangle. So we're going to be finding the side lengths, one of the three side lengths on a right triangle. The standards covered are 8EE2 and 8G6 and 7. The page numbers on the hardcover book are pages 236 through 241 and pages 121 through 124 out of the practice journal. Okay, so today we're going to be working with a formula for Pythagorean theorem, and this is something that you're going to have to memorize. It's actually a really easy concept to memorize, or a formula to memorize. It's going to be working with understanding what A and B are versus what C is. So our formula is A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Most common made mistake when kids are working with this is they think it's A squared times B squared. So remember, we're adding. So A squared times B squared is going to give us that third side of C. So what does that really mean? Well, your A and your B in this formula are what they call the legs of the triangle. So this only works for right triangles. So understanding how to go through and actually break down what a right triangle's pieces are. Well, these are what you call the legs of the triangle. They're the ones that make up that right angle. The two legs are the ones that make up the right angle of the triangle. So once again, this only works for right triangles. Your hypotenuse, that's probably a new word to many of you, is going to be that third side, or this is your C side. So the hypotenuse is really your longest side. It's opposite the right angle if you need that, but that is going to be your C, okay? So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to actually be using our orders of operation. We're going to be solving for a variable, and we're going to be substituting, okay? So we're going to use previously learned knowledge. The new information today is just understanding the makeup of the formula, A squared plus B squared equals C squared, and understanding the parts of that triangle. So our parts of a right triangle, our legs make up our right angle, and then our hypotenuse is that third side that's opposite the right angle, okay? So let's go ahead and practice this concept, because this is what we're going to be doing throughout the whole lesson. So on here we have A and B. Remember, these are our legs of our triangle. So our legs of the triangle make up the right angle. So here's our A, and here's our B, for those of you that are visual. So now we're going to go ahead and plug that information in to our equation. So where we have A, I'm going to write a 3 squared. Don't forget we have to write the squared. Plus 4 squared equals C squared, which we don't know what C is. You understand where I'm pulling this information? I'm just pulling the numbers where I had A and where I had B. Now, one thing that you need to understand is if you had flip-flopped the A and the B, that's okay. You just can't flip-flop an A with a C. Okay, so you have to use your legs in this part of the equation, but you can have these reversed if you would like to. If somebody else looked at this and said, well, I used the 4 as my A side and the 3 is my B side, that's okay. This is A, this is B, that's okay. You can reverse those, but you cannot interchange with that hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is always going to sit on the right side of the equal sign. Okay, that has to be our C side. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and solve this. So now I'm looking at it as an equation. So my PEMDAS, parentheses, I don't have any. Do I have any exponents? Yes, I need to solve my exponents. So 3 squared gives me 9. Plus 4 squared gives me 16, and that's going to equal C squared. So now when I go through and I simplify this, now I get to go ahead and do my 9 plus 16, which gives me 25, equals C squared. So now here's the thing that oftentimes people forget. Remember, we can't have it as C squared. We need it to just be a C. So I need to get rid of that squared by doing the square root. Okay, that's going to cancel this part out. So now I need to do the square root over here. Okay, so C is left on this side equals the square root of 25 is 5. So my side length for C is 5. Now if that's 5 inches or meters, it doesn't matter, but I just found out that C was 5. Okay, so we're going to practice some of these where they're leaving the hypotenuse off, and then eventually we're going to get rid of and leave off one of the legs. We're still going to follow the same formula. Okay, so here's our next one. Our formula is up above. Okay, so it doesn't matter. These are our A and B. It doesn't matter which one you choose to put where. Okay, I'll do this one as A and this one as B. If you reverse them, that's okay. So A is 10, remembering to put my squared on that, plus for B, I chose my 24 side, put my squared on that, equals, I don't know the C, so I'm still gonna have to put C squared. Okay, so now I follow orders of operation. Let's go ahead and simplify it. So my 10 squared gives me 100, plus, I don't know 24 squared off the top of my head, so 24 times 24 is 576 equals C squared. So now I'm gonna go ahead and finish simplifying that. So 100 plus 576 gives me 676 equals C squared. Now to get that squared out of there, remember I'm gonna do the square root. Okay, that canceled that out. So the square root of 676 is 26. So I just found out that C equals 26. Okay, and would it make logical sense if I had put 676 where C is? It's not that much longer, but it is my longest side. My hypotenuse is my longest side. It should be my longest number, or sorry, my biggest number, but it shouldn't be like a crazy, crazy big number. It should still be relatively close to the next side. This was my next longest side. There's not that much difference between these, but had I put 676 for an answer there, that really wouldn't have made a whole lot of sense. That wouldn't be 676. It's not that much longer than the 24 side. So make sure that you're doing that square root in the end, and make sure that you're checking, does it make logical sense? Okay. So I want you guys to go through, pause your video and work your way through this one. Once again, A and B, I'll go ahead and identify for you. So let's go ahead and do A and B. Now, if you flip-flopped them, that's okay. So go ahead, pause your video, work your way through and see if you can figure out what C equals. Okay, you should have gotten C equals 17 on this triangle. You're not always going to get perfect whole numbers, so just be prepared. Sometimes you will end up with a decimal number, and that's okay. If you get a decimal number, just round to the first decimal place, so the nearest tenth. You don't have to write really long decimal numbers. Lots of times I will tell you that if you come across where it's not a perfect square, they may leave that as the square root of a number. To me, that doesn't tell me a whole lot. I would rather see the decimal number, but I have noticed like on tests, when like a standardized test, they'll leave it as the square root if it's not a perfect square, okay? So just make sure that you're paying attention if you're taking an assessment and you have multiple choice. Pay attention, how are they giving the answers? Do they want the decimal? Do they leave it as a square root? Okay, so here we're gonna still follow those same concepts. This time they're giving us some rational numbers. So rational numbers would be decimals and fractions that are ending. They have an ending number. Or they either repeat or they terminate. So they're not a forever number. So here we're going to go ahead and still use that same process. So A and B, it doesn't matter which one I pick. I'm going to say this is A and this is B. You can reverse those. So I'm going to plug into my equation up here. So 0.6 squared plus 0.8 squared equals C squared. I don't know C. I don't know the hypotenuse. So now I'll go ahead and use my calculator to do these. So 0.6 squared gives me 0.36 plus 0.8 squared is going to give me 0.64 equals C squared. Okay, so now following my orders of operation still, I'm going to go ahead and put these together. And when I do that, I get 1 equals C squared. Final step is we want to go ahead and do the square root to get rid of that exponent. Oops, square root of 1 is 1. So we just found out that C equals 1. Okay, that's the only time that you're going to have the same answer is if you have the square root of 1, then your answer would still be 1. Otherwise, you'll always get a different number. Okay, so let's try another one of these. This time the rational numbers are working with fractions. Plug it in. We're still going to plug it into that equation. I'm going to say this is A because that's one of the right angles or sides of the right angle, and this is B. You can flip-flop those. C is my hypotenuse, or that side across, straight across from the right angle. Okay, so I'm going to plug in 2/3 squared, plus for B I have 1/2 squared equals C squared. Okay, so now if I simplify, 2/3 squared, well, remember you apply that 2 to both of those numbers. So it would be 4/9 plus 1 times 1 is 1 over 2 times 2 is 4. And then that's going to give me equals C squared. This is more advanced, so we're going to practice it. I won't assess you on this. You will practice it, but I won't assess you Pythagorean theorem with fractions. Okay, I want you to understand Pythagorean theorem, but we're going to go ahead and practice it together. Okay, so now I have to remember my rules for adding fractions because now I have 4/9 plus 1/4. We've been practicing this skill a whole lot, the crisscross straight across. So 4 times 4 is 16, plus 1 times 9 is 9, over 9 times 4 is 36. So now when I add those, I get 25 over 36 equals C squared. Okay, now I want to get that squared out of there. So I have to square root it. So now I'm going to do the square root of 25 over 36. So the square root of 25 gives me 5 over the square root of 36. Gives me 6. My final answer is C equals 5/6. Okay, pretty complex, multi-step. It's just kind of tying multiple things together that you've learned throughout the year. Once again, we'll practice them. I won't assess you on rational, or at least the fraction parts of rational numbers. I may decimals. Okay, so let's try another one of those working with the fractions. We'll go ahead and try one more. The decimals aren't quite as hard as the fractions. Those fractions are multi-step. So they flip this triangle around. It doesn't matter. We're still going to use the right angle for our A and B. So I'll do this one as A and this one as B. Okay, so 2/5 squared plus for B 3/10 squared equals C squared. So plugging in our information, that's our first step, substitute in. Second step, simplify with orders of operation. So 2/5 squared, 2 squared is 4 over 5 squared is 25 plus 3 squared is 9 over 10 squared is 100 equals C squared. Okay, so now I have a set of fractions that I'm adding. You can either do common denominators or you can do the crisscross straight across, whatever you're comfortable with. For me, so I don't have to work with such large numbers, I'm going to do a common denominator on this one because I know that 25 will go into 100 4 times. So I'm going to just change this front fraction. That way I don't have to work with such large numbers. So 4 times 4 is going to give me 16 over 100 plus 9 over 100. Okay, and those of you that did the crisscross straight across, you're just going to have bigger numbers that you're going to have to reduce down. So now when I go through to do this, 25 is my top number. On this one, because I did common denominators, 100 stays as the bottom. So now that equals C squared. We're going to do the square root. Cancels out the squared. Okay, the square root of 25 is 5 over the square root of 100 is 10. Okay, will that reduce down? That'll still reduce down to 1/2. So final answer there would be 1/2 instead of the 5/10. We would go to that next step of reducing it down to 1/2. Pretty advanced. That's pretty advanced. Okay. So we're going to go ahead. Like I said, don't freak out if that's the part that you're not understanding is working with those fractions. We'll practice them together. I'm not going to assess you on those rational fraction numbers. I want you just getting comfortable with substituting in for A and B and C. So now we're going to go ahead and practice where they're giving us one of the legs is missing. Okay, we're still going to plug in like we did before. We're going to still solve for that missing letter. Okay, so here's my A and my B. Now they've already identified this one as A, so this obviously has to be B. This is my C side. Okay, so do I know the A? No, so I'm going to write A squared. Plus my B side was 16, so 16 squared, equals my C side was a 20, so 20 squared. I'm still going to now simplify, convert those squareds. Okay, just like orders of operation, I would simplify any exponents before I'd move on to anything else. So now we'll go ahead and simplify. I can't do A squared, that stays the same. Okay, so how is this different? Before we guys had the C squared by itself. This time it's going to be one of these two spots. So my A squared's there. Plus I'm going to go ahead and do my 16 squared, which is 256. Okay, and those of you on calculators, you can either do 16 times 16 or most of you will have a button that either has a little 2 number or you'll have a button that does this and you can then push a 2. If you are wanting to understand that quick button push and you don't know how to do your calculator, come see me, I'll help you out with that. Okay, so then 20 squared is 400. Okay, so now how is this different? I don't have the A squared by itself. So this is the part that's different. Okay, we don't get to pick the C side. The A and the B we can flip-flop, but we don't get to pick the C side and substitute in. So we're still trying to get that A squared by itself, which means just like we would do before back in chapter 1, we would work to get A by itself. So I'm going to go minus 256. Okay, so now I just have the A squared over here, but whatever I do to one side of the equal sign, I have to go to the other side and do minus 256. Okay, so 400 minus 256 gives me 144. Okay, now I still want to get it to just be an A. So to get rid of that squared, I'm going to do the square root to cancel that out. So the square root, because those are opposites, of 144 is 12. So I just found out that the A equals 12. So my A length is 12. That makes sense. It's my shortest side. When I'm looking at it, I can visually see that it is my shortest side, and that is my smallest number. Okay, so the part that's different here than those very first ones that we did is now we're solving for the A or the B. So remembering that we're identifying, we don't get to just plug in the 2 that we know in those front 2 spots. Those are the legs. The A and the B are the legs, the part that make up the right angle. Okay, and that's the most common mistake is kids think, oh, I just plug in the 2 numbers that I know into A and B. No, you have to make sure that you're plugging in the ones that are making up the right angle. Okay, there's my right angle. Those are the numbers or the letters that are substituting in here. This is my C. Okay, so I don't know A, so we'll leave that. Plus my B side, this is my B, because that's the other part of the right angle, is 2.1 squared equals, I know the C this time is 2.9. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and simplify. I can't simplify any further the A squared right now. So now on my calculator, 2.1 squared gives me plus 4.41 equals 2.9 squared is 8.41. Okay, I want to work to get A squared by itself. Here's my equal sign. How am I going to get rid of that 4.41? I'm going to subtract. So I'm going back to stuff that I learned in that we reviewed in chapter 1. That's gone. So whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. I now have A squared equals 8.41 minus 4.41 is 4. Final step, I have to get that squared out of there. So we have to do that square root to cancel it out. So A equals the square root of 4, A equals 2. Does that make sense? Yes, it should not be a number that's the largest. My largest side is going to be that hypotenuse. Okay, so had I written down that A was 4, well, that wouldn't make sense because the hypotenuse has to be the longest side. Okay, so we make sure your final step, make sure that you're doing the square root of that. Okay, so basically out of this lesson, you're working through solving a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where these two are your legs, and this is your hypotenuse. Okay, that's your longest side. Your legs make up your right angle, so make sure that you're identifying your two lengths that are making up the right angle and plugging those in. If you're solving for the hypotenuse, it's very simple. It's one step less. If you're missing your A or your B, you have to remember to do that step of isolating to get that letter by itself. So you're going to have to do some subtraction there. Key thing on this one, don't forget to do the square root of your number. To get rid of this squared, you have to do the square root of whatever the number is. Okay, so good luck with this and just keep plugging away and working hard. I promise the more you practice these, the better you will get. When I assess you, I will assess you on ones that are, for the most part, pretty easy numbers to work with. I'm not going to say that you won't ever get decimal numbers, but I promise I won't assess you when you're working rational numbers in fraction format. Okay, we'll practice those, but I won't be assessing you on those.